Rudolph, and I'm so excited to be teaching on Kaleidoscope this year. I loved creating the lesson that I'm about to share with you. It was inspired by the movie Immortal Beloved, which is stars Gary Oldman, and I think that's his name. And it is about Beethoven, and it's such a beautiful movie. And in my favorite scene in the movie, which I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's a very beautiful and powerful scene where Beethoven, as a young child, ends up running through the town because of some difficulty that he wants to escape from, and ends up laying in a body of water surrounded by stars reflecting in the water. So I was inspired because we're doing Beethoven. So instead of it being literal, like this is Beethoven, that's what it made me think of. And because my theme is monochromatic, I thought the evening sky with the lights and the darks all in the shades of blue and a tinge of purple, I thought would be really amazing and beautiful to connect to that energy. Of course, also I love art and I love self-expression and freedom, and this scene in the movie embodies all those things. And so it will be really fun to dive into that feeling. In the beginning, you'll see the drawing's already done because this is a shorter video, and so there'll be a printable, a traceable that you can use to trace the image if you want, or you can try to draw it on your own, or do anything. You can collage, paint over. And anyway, we're gonna really have fun doing this. I had fun doing this, and I hope that you enjoy it. All right, see you in the class. So here, what I'm starting out doing is just picking up some ultramarine blue and a touch of black and putting water on a foam brush, making it sort of liquidy, and just getting the feeling of the background. When I'm thinking about water, I'm looking at a reference and I'm thinking which areas are darker, which areas are lighter, and trying to be very, very loose. See, in this area, I'm using more ultramarine, straight ultramarine, and the other area I used a bit more black. That's why one area looks a little duller and the other area is a little bit brighter. And see, I'm putting a little more black in there too, and just sort of loosely, very, very loosely filling up the canvas. Now, I had done the outline in pen initially, but I noticed that the water was sort of washing it away. So quickly I went over my lines with a very thin brush and some paint. So I went over the lines with a thin uh, ultramarine blue and black mixture. And so now I'm just kind of going over her, and I'm going into the darker areas. And what I'm going to end up doing is just kind of going over this whole area. I'm going to take this paint and go into the crevices at first. In a way, it's kind of like getting to know the space. I'm sort of making connections with the form. So going into her shadows first and going into the shadows and leaving a little bit of the light area. But then you'll see I kind of end up going over most of the lights anyway. But, it's very, very loose in this process to just sort of feel out the space. And so see, now this is covered. But if you can notice up in the left-hand corner, it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more airy. I'm letting it drip. The canvas is upright. It's on an easel, so the liquidy paint can sort of drip down, and you can make it more drippy if you want. That's totally a matter of your own personal preference, because you can make the background more drippy and let it dry and then layer over with thin layers over the top of that. But I did a little bit of drippy. We want to give the feeling of water, but in a very, very loose sort of way. So here I'm going into the shadows that I created. I drew those shapes out where you can see the shadows, and I am going into those areas now and leaving the other parts a little bit lighter. Okay, and going back again and bringing some darkness. So it's just a process of looking at the reference and see how I go side to side. It's like the idea of water, like ripples. So when I use my foam brush to try and create some kind of texture of water, I'll do that sort of horizontal side to side lines a little bit, and that creates somewhat of a feeling of sideways movement. So now I'm taking a smaller brush and going a little bit more into the darker areas and refining a bit. to kind of bring it back a little bit more. I'm not using the foam brush now just because this is a smaller area and it would be harder to have control over these little shapes like that one. So I'm thinking about shapes, and it depends what you end up drawing. Do you draw her or do you do something else? You could even collage, like I said, and maybe paint over the collage. It is open to your own personal exploration. Um, but I want to just, the point is to kind of go into these shadows and add more depth into the shadows because the form basically is shadows and light. So I'm going in, this arm is a little bit more covered and it goes into the water. So there's really not much light hitting that and it goes far away from her. So I'm going into that area and covering it. But you can still see, I mean, the paint is transparent, but I'm kind of just going over that area and making it a bit um, darker. So now I can refine a bit more. I'm bringing some paint mixed with white, a little bit of titanium white, and going into the neck area and into the areas near the shadows so I can kind of merge the shadow area into the light area, and then take a kind of a mid-level, a color in between the two. So I have the light color and then I have the dark color, and then I'm finding a middle color to sort of merge the dark into the light. So going over again, and that's how you do that. You have your dark color, you have your light color, and then you mix a color that's in the middle of those two, and then you merge the two together, going down onto the chest area, and just again building up some layers and creating dimension. I do love the feeling of the texture in the background, and then some sort of smooth, fleshy feel on her skin. So here again, I'm coming from the shadow into the light. So I'll be working a little bit on how to bring the shadow into the light by creating a color on the light part of her face and then a mid-level color in the area next to the shadow that then merges into the shadow color. Okay, so we had our shadow. We come in with some lighter areas and then find a color in the middle that can merge the two. Okay, again, going into my lights, adding a little bit lighter. So it's almost like if you envision a gradient, you have the darkest area that then merges into the light. So this is what I'm working on doing, taking my dark and then doing a color that's in between the dark and light to kind of bridge that movement from the dark area to the light area. And I continue to work on this. I mean, see, it starts to make it light, and so it's almost too light. And as you'll see, I go back and forth. I'll bring more dark then into the dark area and bring it up into the light. It's a process of doing that, but I want to keep my shapes and make sure that I don't lose those. Okay, like my shapes of the woman here, of the shadows and the light. That's the most important thing to create the illusion of form. So see, I'm taking a bit dark now and going back into my shape, and I'm going to merge it again with the light. So it's a back and forth until you reach the area that you feel happy with what you have achieved. The feeling that makes sense to you of dark into light and where the shapes are lying. It's all about shapes. I mean, they're really the kind of geometric shapes and puzzle pieces that fit together. But you think about measurements and how far apart things are from each other and how to express those. That's the main thing when it comes to painting a person or anything really for that matter. But if you kind of break it down into shapes and look at it abstractly, it really does help a lot. So here I am continuing to go back and forth on her face and bring it down a bit. Also, I'm not thinking too much about, how do I make her look like she's floating in water? I don't have any of those thoughts. I'm just basically looking at the reference and looking for darks and looking for lights and the patterns. And that's the main thing that I'm focused on and taking it one step at a time, the idea of trusting the process. So I'm bringing my darks down around her shoulder, and now I'm working on the hair and creating the shadow marks in the hair. Her hair is floating, So it has this sort of fluid movement to it. So I start doing that by just doing some dark brush strokes. Here I'm refining a bit around the nose and the eye. So you'll do kind of a dark area in the eye, and then as you come out of that space, create a situation where the color gets a bit lighter, but not as light as the surrounding area. So you have like another merging of dark to light. Continuing to work up into the forehead and over the side by the cheek, going darker again. And see, it just like, continues to build little by little. You start out with one overall pattern, and then you kind of refine by going back and forth, back and forth. Taking the dark and merging it into the light. You're going to go into the lip area, but it still has a loose quality and expressive quality, which is really what I do want to keep. That's kind of the most important thing to me with this particular um, painting is having that sort of loose quality. So not getting too tight. Again, paying attention to the shapes and refining. I noticed that there was a bit of a dark area going up into the side of the mouth, so I wanted to bring that in. And then I'm adding some lights. It's not white white. It's white with a little bit of the blue mixed in there, because white would be extremely light. So it has a little bit of the blue mixed in, and now I'm gonna put the light spots in as if they are little patterns, and then combine the two, the light with the area around it by once again mixing a color that is one step darker than the lights, and then I can merge them into the background. Okay, coming in, still working on form and developing form. Okay, there's a little bit of light around the bottom part of that nostril. So, just going in again, looking at the reference, being led by what I see and trying to translate that onto the canvas with a smaller brush. It's all about light and dark, and placing the darks where they go, placing the lights where they go, and then merging the two. Okay, coming back into the hair and adding a bit more depth. Okay. And softening some edges. So here again, softening still, going back into areas that are again shadows, and I love that shape, the shape under her body on the side that kind of curves up into that looks like a wave almost, but that's the area in between her shoulder and where her arm starts. It creates that shadow shape. So I'm going into the darker shadows with my straight ultramarine and starting to bring certain areas back in order to bring other areas forward. Because now that I've gotten to this point, I want to kind of do with the rest of the piece what I have started to do with the face, which is to push back shadows, bring forward the light. So here I'm bringing the ultramarine blue into this area, but thinking about water and the lines that kind of go back and forth, the sort of organic side to side, loose brush strokes. And here on the arm, I can kind of go side to side with my my ultramarine to create that feeling of ripples. So this is on her, also bringing some depth there and some darkness because this is a darker spot, and will help refine and create depth. Okay, so working on that area. So I'm always scanning, where is the darkness, where is the light, how can I push back the darkness and bring forward the light, and going back and forth and refining. Again, thinking about the loose brush strokes of the water. What does that feel like? I often, whenever I'm painting anything, I do like to think about what it would feel like. It's almost like I'm there touching it. I like to make that connection, as if you're in the water. I want it to be lighter right in this area. I think to me it feels, it's kind of not over her heart exactly, but I like the feeling of light coming out from that area. So I liked creating a little bit more of a brightness right in the center. Adding a bit more depth. I used, again, the ultramarine blue. I put some black in there. And just ultramarine. Now I'm kind of going over, I'm creating layers with the wave shapes with my brush, side to side, organic. You notice it does move. Some areas are a little bit wider, some are more narrow. So there is an organic feeling to it. It's not so formulaic. Okay, creating some depth around her head. She has a lighter neck, so I want to put some darkness on the side of her neck in the water so that her neck can come forward in her face. More darkness here. And I want to merge this water into her arms because it's sort of kind of going over her arms. So I'm bringing like the shadows of the ripples over her arms. You have the water underneath it, and then you just kind of go across a little bit. And here again, side to side, creating that sort of horizontal movement, but it does have an organic feeling to it, and it's very, very loose. It's playing. It's sort of getting really loose with your brush when it comes to the water areas. Picking up more of this black and mixing it with the blue and just adding a bit more depth in certain areas. I want to almost like frame this piece, not completely, but add a little bit more of like a darkness around the edges. So this kind of leads into her. So I get some depth around the hair and some depth around the arm. Again, kind of creating that sort of water over the arm feeling. And then some lights because water has light reflecting in it. So I put some of these light areas to look like there's light hitting the water. This is not just white, it's white mixed with ultramarine, maybe even a little bit of black in there. So now I go up in this area, is just a little area of lightness. So think about the movement again. It's kind of the side to side zigzaggy shape, and then I can bring the ultramarine directly into that. Again, it's very loose, very expressive, which is what was fun about doing this piece. Okay, bring more darkness into this area over here. So she comes forward. More ultramarine, blue. I'm thinking about the shape of those organic ripples. Side to side with a bit of a lighter color. And this is the hair, so I'm going into the hair and trying to create some light marks in the flowy hair strands. For the hair strands and up in the area up there, um, I used a little bit of a turquoise blue with white, just to have one slight color difference. So it was like a turquoise, like a turquoise color. I added a touch of white to that for those areas that look a little bit different, have a hint more of green in them. Again, taking that color, picking up a smaller brush, and creating these little ripple lines. I do love water. Who doesn't love water? It almost looks like it's coming, she's like blowing out of her mouth or something, but it's water. So on the arm, I'm bringing this light color also over the arm. So it looks like the water is sort of going over her. We did the dark first and then come in with the light. Okay, so these are areas that once you put the darks in and kind of figure out like areas of depth, like where do you want to place darks in sort of a pattern, um, and dependent on, is it next to a light area to bring the light area forward, then you can come in and add these beautiful little ripples. So now what I'm doing, the most fun part, is I took white paint on a brush and added some water, and then I flicked little stars like splatter paint with my brush. So see, I'm sort of pulling back on my brush. This was really, really fun because I want to create the situation where she's laying in an ocean full of stars at night. This really was fun. I kept you can put your canvas down for this, but I kept it upright. And you can go, you could do more, you could do as many as you want, as many stars as you want. I love this technique because it makes the little stars, all the little tiny specks. So see, I'm just flicking. So it was white paint and I mixed with a little bit of water, so it had a little bit of liquid, not drippy, drippy, but put it on the brush and then I flicked it back so that it splattered onto the canvas and created the stars. And then I did my own little stars. Sometimes with stars, I like to take, I either make them light or I'll do like a little bit darker than white mixture and then put the white in the middle. And that makes them look like they're kind of glowing, like there's like a halo around them. See how they're not, the one on her chest is sort of not a white white. And then I'll take a white and put it right in the middle of that. And then it has this glowing effect. And that's basically it. This feeling of expansiveness, beauty, peace, the flow, like how you feel when you are in that creative space. There's nothing like it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.